Hello everybody. Hope you're all feeling well and keeping yourselves safe. Now that we've entered our 6th week of lockdown, hopefully you've been accessing the home learning platform that's on our website and that you have been working through some of the activities that have been done there. There's some super things on BBC Bitesize and lots of other resources for you to use as well. And I hope that you've been accessing the High Crags YouTube videos, putting together some of the challenges, like the ones that Year 6 have been facing with their rather talentless show that they did to do with the Spice Girls, and also the PE challenge that's set out by Miss Goody and Mr. Armour. Now I've got a second book from the Pictrix Potter range that I wanted to read too, and if you remember we were reading about Peter Rabbit last time, and this time it's about his cousin, Benjamin Bunny. So I'm going to read that part. Okay. So one morning, a little rabbit sat on a bank. He pricked his ears and listened to the trip-trot of a pony. A gig was coming along the road. That's like a little cart that goes with it that the people can sit on, that's been pulled by the pony. It was driven by Mr. McGregor, and beside him sat Mrs. McGregor in her best bonnet. So there he is, sat on this bank. It sees that if they're going somewhere, then maybe he can go somewhere too. As soon as they'd passed, little Benjamin Bunny slid down into the road and set off with a hop, a skip and a jump to call upon his relations, who lived in the wood at the back of Mr. McGregor's garden. There he is. He's bounding down there, isn't he? That wood was full of rabbit holes, and in the nearest, sandiest one of all lived Benjamin's aunt and his cousins, Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. Now, old Mrs. Rabbit was a widow. That means her husband has died. She earned her living by knitting rabbit wool mittens and muffetees. I once bought a pair at a bazaar, you know. There she is. Okay. She also sold herbs and rosemary tea and rabbit tobacco, which is what we call lavender. So she's very busy, very, very busy. Little Benjamin didn't not very much want to see his aunt. He came round the back of the fir tree and nearly tumbled upon the top of his cousin Peter. Can you see Peter's ears just sticking up there? Peter was sitting by himself. He looked poorly. He's there in that little hollow, isn't he? Wrapped in a red handkerchief. And he was dressed in a red cotton pocket handkerchief. Peter, said little Benjamin in a whisper, who's got your clothes? Now, can you remember from the last story what happened to Peter's clothes when he went into Mr. McGregor's garden? Peter replied, the scarecrow in Mr. McGregor's garden, and described how he had been chased around the garden and had dropped his shoes and his coat. Little Benjamin sat down beside his cousin and assured him that Mr. McGregor had gone out in a gig and that Mrs. McGregor had also gone, and certainly for the day, because she was wearing her best bonnet. I think they're cooking a plan together, aren't they? They might go and try and claim his clothes back. Peter said he hoped it would rain. At this point, old Mrs. Rabbit's voice was heard inside the rabbit hole calling, Cottontail, Cottontail, fetch Mr. McCaw, Camomile. Peter said he thought it might be better if he went for a walk. He might feel better. They went away hand in hand and got upon the flat top of the wall at the bottom of the wood. From here they looked down into Mr. McGregor's garden. Peter's coat and shoes were plainly to be seen upon the scarecrow, topped with an old tam o' shanter of Mr. McGregor. Now, tam o' shanter is a sort of a hat. But there they are on the wall, and they're looking down into the garden, and there's Scarecrow. You can see Peter's blue jacket, remember the big brass buttons? And that's the tam o' shanter there. Little Benjamin said, it spoils people's clothes to squeeze under a gate. The proper way to get in is to climb down a pear tree. Well, Peter fell down head first, but it was of no consequence, as the bed below was newly raked and quite soft. Oh, yeah, so he's tumbled all the way down, but fortunately it was quite a soft landing. It had been sown with lettuces. That's not sewn as in with a needle and thread. It means it had been planted, like one I've done with the Hail Project when they were sowing seedlings, okay? So these are small lettuces have been grown. They left a great many odd little footmarks all over the bed, especially little Benjamin, who was wearing clogs on his feet. You can see all the marks that has been left all over the ground. Little Benjamin said that the first thing to be done was to get back Peter's clothes in order that they might be able to use the pocket handkerchief. They took them off the scarecrow. There'd been rain during the night. There was water in the shoes, and the coat had somehow shrunk a little bit. And Benjamin tried on the tam o' shanter, but it was too big for him. It does look rather big for him, doesn't it? It looks enormous. That was fitting Mr. McGregor's head, wouldn't it? Then he suggested that they should fill the pocket handkerchief with onions as a little present for his aunt. Peter didn't seem to be enjoying himself. He just kept on hearing noises. I think he's scared that he's going to get caught in that garden again, isn't he? Looks quite pensive there, a little bit concerned. And there's Benjamin Bunny collecting all these onions. Benjamin, on the contrary, that means like on the other hand, was perfectly at home and he ate a lettuce leaf. He said that he was in the habit of coming into the garden with his father to get lettuces for their Sunday dinner. The name of little Benjamin's papa was Old Mr. Benjamin Bunny. And the lettuces were certainly very fine, so he's not bothered at all. Might even say he's cool as a cucumber. It wouldn't be if Mr. McGregor was in the garden, would he? Peter didn't eat anything. He said he would like to go home. Presently, he dropped half the onions. So he's carrying them on, he's dropping them all. I think it's just because he's so worried. He wants to get home to safety. Little Benjamin said that it was not possible to get back up the pear tree with a load of vegetables, so he led the way boldly, that means really bravely, towards the other end of the garden. They went along a little walk on planks, under a sunny red brick wall, and the mice sat on their doorsteps chewing cherry stones, and they winked at Peter Rabbit and little Benjamin Bunny. So there's the planks are put there so that gardeners use that when they want to walk across their vegetable plots, so they don't go into the soil. And there are the mice there. Presently, Peter let the pocket handkerchief go again. Oh, dearie me. Because he's just not concentrating, is he? He's worried. They got amongst flower pots and frames and tubs. Peter heard noises worse than ever. His eyes were as big as lollipops. He was a step or two in front of his cousin when he suddenly stopped. Wonder what he's seeing. I think he's just stopped still. There's a robin there as well, isn't there? Robin redbreast. This is what those little rabbits saw round the corner. Little Benjamin took one look and then in less than half a minute he hid himself and Peter and the onions underneath a large basket. Because what did he see but a cat? And cats would eat bunny rabbits. The cat got up, stretched herself and came and sniffed at the basket. Perhaps she liked the smell of onions. Anyway, she sat down upon the top of the basket. Remember, they're in there and the cat's getting on top of the basket. Got to be able to move. And she sat there for 5 hours. So for 5 hours, they're stuck in that enclosed space. Now, I cannot draw you a picture of Peter and Benjamin underneath the basket because it was quite dark and because the smell of onions was fearful. It made Peter Rabbit and little Benjamin cry because it's that strong. The sun got round behind the wood and it was quite late in the afternoon, but still the cat sat upon the basket. Oh no, if Mr. McGregor comes home, they're going to be trapped, aren't they? At length there was a pitter-patter, and some bits of mortar fell from the wall above. The cat looked up and saw old Benjamin Bunny prancing along the top of the wall of the upper terrace. He was smoking a pipe of rabbit tobacco and had a little switch that's like a little stick in his hand. He was looking for his son. I think he's guessed that his son is somewhere in Mr. McGregor's garden. Old Mr. Bunny had no opinion whatever of cats. That means he wasn't scared. He took a tremendous jump off the top of the wall to the top of the cat and he cuffed it off the basket, scratching off a handful of fur. The cat was just too surprised to scratch back. When old Mr. Bunny had driven the cat into the greenhouse, he locked the door. Then he came back to the basket and took out his son Benjamin by the ears and whipped him with a little switch. Then he took out his nephew Peter. He was quite cross, because they put themselves in danger there, hadn't they? Then he took out the handkerchief of onions and he marched out of the garden. And there's the cat looking on from behind the greenhouse. When Mr. McGregor returned about half an hour later, that's only 30 minutes, woof, that was quite close, he observed several things which perplexed him. That means, I don't understand how that happened. It looked as though some person had been walking all over the garden in a pair of clogs. Only the footmarks were just too ridiculously little. So he can't understand that. Also, he couldn't understand how the cat could have managed to shut herself inside the greenhouse, locking the door upon the outside. Now, we know it's the rabbits that did it, isn't it? The rabbit's paw prints all over his soil. And we know it's Benjamin Bunny who locked the cat in the greenhouse. When Peter got home, his mother forgave him because she was so glad to see that he'd found his shoes and coat. Cottontail and Peter folded up the handkerchief, and old Mrs. Rabbit strung up the onions and hung them from the kitchen ceiling with the bunches of herbs and the rabbit tobacco. It's always one in the end, wasn't it? I still don't think it'd be a good idea to go down to the garden again, though. Do you? Okay. Right, so I'll look forward to speaking to you next week. It's been lovely to see all the work that you've been sending through on our Twitter account. Some fabulous home learning going on. I'm so proud. And Mr. Harris has designed a newsletter that's coming out at the moment, which has got loads of pictures of what people have been doing. So it's fabulous. So keep working through your things. Keep your family safe. Do what you're told. And take care. Okay. Bye-bye.